We begin with the latest on the seizure of the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, by U.S. forces. Venezuela's military has now said it recognizes Maduro's deputy, Delcy Rodríguez, as the country's acting leader. The defense minister, Vladimir Padrino, says the armed forces have been activated nationwide to defend Venezuela's sovereignty. He added that a large part of Maduro's security team were killed when U.S. Special Forces extracted the deposed leader from the capital, Caracas. And for more, I'm joined in the studio now by DW's Oscar Schlenker, who has been reporting from Venezuela for many years. Oscar, really great to see you. So we just heard that the military is standing firmly behind the interim leader, Rodriguez. Did you expect this?
Well, yeah, this was expected because they want to keep on the legitimacy of the regime. The regime continues without their head of state, which was Maduro as the leader of the Chavista government. And they want to keep that legitimacy going, so they have to go by the book. And the Constitution says that if the president cannot assume his duties, then it goes to the vice president. So that's part of following the book and going by the book, that they want to establish that they are a legitimate government. And that's why they're following these rules.
Well, Venezuelans have now had just about a day to absorb all of these developments, Maduro's removal, the strikes on Caracas. What have you been hearing from people inside the country? How are they coping with these developments?
Well, there's a lot of fear. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty, but Venezuelans are not strangers to uncertainty. We've had uncertainty for the past 20 years because we've had many crises that we've lived through. However, there are neighborhoods in Caracas that are still without electricity after more than 24 hours, and that is an issue that have many people worried. And in the rest of the country, well, people are expectant to see what's going to happen because the regime has not fallen. Maduro has been taken out of power and captured, and that has the country rattled. Some celebrating it quietly because there's still a lot of repression in Venezuela, and obviously his supporters mourning it.
Well, we heard Donald Trump say yesterday in his very lengthy press conference that the United States is going to run Venezuela until further notice. And at the same time, he said he would be willing to work together with the interim president, Rodriguez. What do you make of all of this?
Well, it's very worrisome for Venezuelans to think, well, how is Donald Trump and the United States going to run Venezuela, especially after we've seen how the Trump administration has treated Venezuelan migrants in these mass deportations in the last months. So there's a lot of mistrust in Trump. However, when we hear that he wants to cooperate with Delcy Rodríguez instead of Maria Corina Machado, who is the opposition leader that was bringing about change, and that because of her, we could celebrate these mass presidential elections in 2024, then that has brought a lot of concern over a lot of Venezuelans, as we've seen in social media and in different reports. So definitely there is a lot more questions than answers that Venezuelans are getting at this point, and it's becoming a little bit anxious for many.
Oscar, I want to ask you also about some of the other entrenched actors in Venezuela. There's many different groups and factions, many of whom I imagine are likely to resist any kind of meaningful change. What are you most worried about?
Well, yeah, I'm most worried about, and I think the Trump administration is too, of a power void, because a power void would be catastrophic in Venezuela with all these factions that are armed, that are involved with international criminal organizations, including international, other international powers like China and Russia and Iran, that would become a power grab that is uncontrollable. And I think that's what many people are fearing, that a power void would result in chaos.
And which are the groups that you feel could do the most damage right now?
I think the groups that are most vulnerable or not most vulnerable, but more damaging would be the ones in the border with Colombia, the guerrillas that have taken control of some areas of Venezuela and have taken control of industries like the illegal mining.
So many different players, such a complex situation unfolding in Venezuela. Oscar, many thanks indeed for all of your insights. That was DW's Oscar Schlenker. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
We can now speak to Phil Gunson. He's a senior analyst at Crisis Group, and he joins us from Caracas. Welcome to DW. How do you interpret the statement that we heard from the Venezuelan armed forces?
Well, I think it's a sign that essentially, if you like, the dictator has gone, but the dictatorship is still in power, and they are consolidating the situation. They are basically lining up behind Delcy Rodríguez because it's in everybody's interest, on their part at least, that the regime retake. This will be the recipe as before, simply minus Maduro.
There's, of course, a lot of concern about instability in Venezuela in the coming days and weeks. What do you see as the biggest risk there right now?
Well, I think the biggest risk has always been that the army would split, in the sense that if that were to happen, and of course there is a possibility of something approaching civil war, at least short-term, significant violent unrest. That doesn't seem to be the case right now. The opposition, of course, is more or less demobilized. There's been nobody on the streets, certainly nobody has been celebrating. And the other element of this that, of course, is worrying is that whereas it's always been presented that Maduro would leave and there would be a smooth or relatively smooth transition to a more democratic situation, in effect, Trump seems to be saying, well, we can do business with the people who are left, and that the real problem was Maduro.
You mentioned that there haven't been people celebrating on the streets. It's been now about a day since Maduro was captured, and Venezuelans have, of course, been processing all of what's just occurred. How would you describe the mood on the streets today in Caracas?
It's very quiet. It's been quiet, as you might imagine. It was extremely quiet yesterday because people were very scared to go out on the streets, not just because they didn't know what else might happen. They'd just been bombed, and is very much aware that these people are still in power. And although there were some reports early on of people going out, say, on balconies and cheering and clapping, I think the mood is quite somber because people are realizing that whilst most are happy to see the back of Maduro, there's no sign of an end to the political crisis. And in turn, that means that the economic crisis, which has created a tremendous humanitarian emergency here, will continue and is likely to get worse.
I'd like to ask you about the Venezuelan opposition and what this moment means for them, and specifically for the opposition's leading figure, Maria Corina Machado, and, especially after Trump essentially made it clear that he doesn't consider her to be the country's next leader. Where does the opposition go from here?
Yes, it's tremendously ironic because they looked forward for so long to the departure of Maduro, but yesterday was a real bucket of cold water for Maria Corina Machado and everybody that supports her. And Trump, in a sense, I think he's correct in the sense that not because Machado doesn't have support or respect from Venezuelans, but because the key factor in all of this is the military. And unless you have an agreement with the military and can guarantee internal security and the stability of the country as a transition takes place, then there's no point trying to install a new government. And unfortunately, even though Maria Corina has often claimed to have the support from within the military, it hasn't materialized, and the US is clearly not convinced by what she and others have said.
That was Phil Gunson from Crisis Group speaking to us from Caracas. Many thanks indeed for your insights.
Thank you.